Joining me now is Michael McFaul, former U.S. ambassador to the Russian Federation and MSNBC international affairs analyst. Ambassador, thank you very much for being here this morning. What does it say about Putin's leadership that it was Belarusian President Lukashenko who negotiated the deal with Prigozhin?
I think it's pretty embarrassing for Vladimir Putin that he had to rely on Lukashenko, somebody he considers his junior partner, to do this deal. And more generally, I think it's pretty embarrassing to Putin all around. Just hours before he did this deal, he went on national television and gave a very tough speech where he told the people of Russia, I'm going to crush this rebellion and these traitors. And then just hours later, he cut this deal, allowing Mr. Prigozhin to go freely to Belarus. So it's not a great look for Vladimir Putin, who always likes to look like he's strong and in command.
You know, we learned through a Kremlin spokesperson that the criminal case against Prigozhin will be closed. And as you just mentioned, he will remain in Belarus. Two questions. One, do you believe that Prigozhin will actually exile himself to Belarus?
He may be there for a time, but I don't think he's going there to retire. I would be very surprised by that. You just saw those people cheering for his soldiers in Rostov. That was very striking to me and will be very striking to Putin and Kremlin officials, because now there's a real opposition candidate who's not in jail, a real leader who's a populist nationalist leader. And I just can't imagine that Prigozhin is just going to sit on the sidelines while he has this moment of glory.
And do you think Vladimir Putin can let this go, especially given, as you pointed out, what he said in that televised speech yesterday?
I honestly don't know. I was very surprised that he capitulated so fast. By the way, I think that says a lot about our theories about how he's going to fight in Ukraine and whether he needs an off-ramp and all these arguments about if he's a rat in a corner, he'll never negotiate. Well, yesterday, he was a rat in a corner and he didn't double down. He didn't escalate. He negotiated. And he looks very weak in terms of whether he's in charge of his own country. I suspect he's going to be looking for a way to reassert himself vis-a-vis Mr. Prigozhin and those Wagner fighters. I just don't exactly know how he'll do it.
So, as I mentioned earlier, the Washington Post is reporting that U.S. intelligence knew Wagner was planning an insurrection. What does that say about Russia's intelligence forces and what they may have known?
Jonathan, that's a fantastic question. If our folks knew about it in mid-June, you have to believe that Russian intelligence knew about this ahead of time. And let's be clear, this operation was not some fly-by-night thing where he just decided passionately to march to Moscow. It looks like it was very well prepared. He then went into Rostov, a major city in Russia, with no resistance at all, and was marching to Moscow with little resistance. That suggests to me that Putin had to have known about all this, but didn't feel like he had the capabilities to stop it militarily.
You know, Ambassador McFaul, you wrote back in February, quote, Putin's war in Ukraine has also triggered deep damage to his own country, especially to Russia's armed forces, the economy, society, and in the long run, to his own regime. Ambassador, did Prigozhin mercenaries overtaking a military headquarters without firing a single bullet expose Putin's vulnerabilities to the world?
Without question. You know, this war in Ukraine has undermined Putin in many ways, as I wrote about in that article. And this is just further evidence that he's losing grip, that it's not consolidated. I mean, you had two of his own militaries. Let's remember, Prigozhin was created by Putin. He's not some rogue opposition figure. This is Putin's guy. And yesterday, as you just talked about, we had their two biggest military forces on the verge of going to war with each other. That is a very bad sign for Vladimir Putin. That shows that he's not just weak internally, but I think it's a signal to the rest of the world. Think if you're Xi Jinping watching this right now, you made a big bet to double down, to support for many years Vladimir Putin as a partner in your opposition to the West. Now that bet looks very problematic for Xi Jinping. And I think all around the world, people have to be nervous that Putin's not in control. And maybe now we'll put more pressure on him to end this war, because the longer the war goes on in Ukraine, the weaker Putin becomes at home.
Ambassador, I'm glad you brought up Russia. You may have just answered this in your last answer, but I'm going to ask this question anyway. Does what happened over this weekend, over the last 48 hours, put pressure on Chinese President Xi to be more active to get Vladimir Putin to conclude his war on Ukraine?
Well, I would hope so. If you listen to Chinese officials, what they fear most is chaos, disillusion. You know, the collapse of the Soviet Union, for instance, is a catastrophic event for Chinese Communist Party officials. They don't want to see chaos on their borders. And I think the longer the war goes, the more probable that becomes. And so I would hope that Xi Jinping would understand that wrapping up this war, putting pressure on his partner, his trusted friend, that he calls him his friend, Vladimir Putin, would be a way to actually preserve Putin in power. Because if it goes on longer, you've just seen this may be something that we would see replayed again and again as the war continues to drag on.
Yes, instability was the word I was looking for, Ambassador McFaul. One more question for you before I have to let you go. You were the former ambassador to the Russian Federation. I am sure you were shocked by what happened. What are you looking for over the next 24 to 48 hours as we get beyond the rebellion?
Two big things. It's been alleged that as part of the deal that the Minister of Defense, Shoigu, and the commander of the Russian Armed Forces, General Gerasimov, will be let go. That hasn't been confirmed, but if that's confirmed, that's a further sign of Putin's weakness. That's real capitulation. And second, I want to know, will Prigozhin continue to be as active on his social media channels, especially Telegram, as he has been before? If that's shut down, that suggests to me that Putin is trying to muzzle him and isolate him in Belarus.